fire people quickly, hire them slowly. You want to have the right people on the job. If they're not able to do the quality that you ask for, if they're not able to get it done in time, that's a big problem.
Hello and welcome to Pillars of Wealth Creation, where we talk about creating financial success with a special focus on business and real estate. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. Now, let's get to it.
Hey, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. And today I want to talk about project management. And so we've got a very big project going on right now, but we've done a lot of projects throughout the years. And with my background, I was, well, first of all, I started out of high school working for a remodeling construction company in the summers. I did that for many years, did that through college. Even as a teacher, my first, or actually every year that I was a teacher, I worked construction in the summer. So I did that many years. Never was the lead on a project, but certainly observed and paid attention to what these guys were doing and how they were leading projects and how the owner of the company was helping lead the projects and so on. And then after I stopped doing that, I started flipping houses. Started buying, single family homes, and we're doing pretty large projects on those properties. Smallest projects were usually like 15, 20 grand. That was rare to have something that small. Some of the bigger projects were well over $100,000 on a single family home. And then we started doing some smaller apartment buildings and, doing even larger projects. And then have now since our biggest project to date is a $6 million renovation, and currently we're doing a $4.1 million renovation on a property. So done some pretty sizable renovations, done some just kind of cookie cutter bread and butter renovations, and have made a lot of the mistakes along the way. And I'm sure there's more mistakes still to be made and to learn from, but I've learned quite a bit over the years of how to manage projects and how not to manage projects. And so I want to pass down some of that to you as a listener so you can understand what it takes to manage these projects and whether you're going to be the lead on managing the projects or you're just going to kind of have the right people in place. All of it's really important to understand how to lead projects because it helps you to understand the entire process so that you know who to hire and who the right person is to hire, and then when to fire maybe the wrong person that you put on the job. You potentially hired somebody to project manage, and maybe they weren't the right fit for you. That certainly has happened to us. We've went through several project managers, and the wrong project managers can really set the project back in many different ways. It can set the project budget back where you're going over budget on items. Maybe you're over improving or under improving on items. And then of course, time. And so those are obviously the two big things. In any project, we want to be on budget and we want to be done in a timely fashion. And if you can't do those, you won't have a successful project. So that's certainly the most important thing. So when I'm looking at managing a project, again, doesn't matter how big or small this project is, the key critical component first to start with is that I need to make sure I have a good plan. So it starts with solid due diligence. We have to make sure we're doing really thorough due diligence when we first are looking at acquiring a property and coming up with a plan that's going to be feasible for what we're trying to achieve. So look, if I'm buying a property, I want to make sure I can raise my rents enough to cover the project cost to where my ROI, my return on investment, makes sense. I don't want to do a project that's going to do an ROI of just a couple percent. It's got to be worthwhile. So it's got to be in the double digits ROI, close to that 20% ROI. I want to make sure I get paid back in 4 to 5 years. And if I can't, it's not worth doing that project. Quite frankly, I'd really like to get paid back quite a bit sooner than that. So I want to see ideally ROI of 25% plus on that project cost. Really important. If you can't see that, then you have to go, okay, well, there's a couple things that you have to decide. First of all, do we narrow our project scope? Do we say, you know what, we can only raise rents $250 a month? We can't be putting all this money into this project. So maybe instead of doing granite countertops, we do laminate countertops. Maybe instead of replacing the cabinets, we reface the cabinets, or we just paint the cabinets. Maybe instead of doing LVP flooring throughout, we do LVP flooring in the common areas, and then in the bedrooms, we do carpet. Um, there's many different, potential things that we can do. As we looked at this project that we're currently doing right now, we're putting $4.1 million into it, for almost 4.2. So what can we do with the rents that we're trying to achieve? We could do quite a bit because we want to achieve very nice rents, and we think we can. It's a great market, it's a great location, all that kind of stuff. We think we can really achieve a lot. But if this property was in a different location, um, and we couldn't achieve the rents, we couldn't do everything we're trying to do. It just wouldn't make sense. So we'd have to pare back that renovation budget and our expectations. So that's critical. The other thing that's critical during due diligence is that you're really paying attention to kind of the systems, the mechanical systems of the building, the structural composition of the building, and understanding what actually has to get done versus what you want to get done. And that's really, really critical. So as we looked at this building, it's a 1971 built building. Okay, there was a few things that we have to be very cognizant about. We have to really think about. Oh, there was no apparent issues with the roof system, but it's an older roof. We had our inspection done on the roof, and we put together a pretty sizable budget to replace sections of the roof. We knew nothing needed to be replaced right away, but with any older type roof, you have to count on that some of it, or maybe all of it, will need to be replaced prior to you exiting that asset. So we put together a sizable budget for the roof. There was no apparent plumbing issues that we could see visually, but we did know that the plumbing is older because it was built in 1971. Now it has copper waste and supply, which is good. It's a good product. However, it doesn't last forever. And so, knowing that, we put together a very nice, sizable plumbing budget. Same thing with electrical. We had an issue with the hallways. We saw that the hallway floor had a pretty sizable slope to it in one section of the hallway. Now, we brought an engineer over, we discovered what was going on with that, and we budgeted properly to fix that issue. We made sure we covered that. So we put the budget for it. We also knew that we were doing a very sizable project. And again, it doesn't matter how big or small the project is, we need to make sure we have contingency items. We want to make sure that if we go over budget, we can cover some of that stuff. Material pricing goes up, right? You got all these tariffs. Who knows if material prices are going up? They haven't really, but do they go up? Does labor rate go up? Right during 2021 COVID, labor and materials skyrocketed. So it blew up a ton of people's budgets, including our own. And so if you have nice overages, contingency overages, then you can cover hopefully all of the expenditure overages that you might have. And you never know. The older the building, the more likely you're going to have some of that type of stuff. So we want to do that. So that's just due diligence. That's just inspection. Now, the other thing that we want to do during due diligence and prior to closing is we want to really start to plan this project. We want to really build out our scope and our budget, and we want to start moving towards execution. So we want to make sure we've got our contractors lined up. We want to make sure we get contracts signed, and we want to make sure we get schedules set. That's really important. If I know I'm closing on August 15th, I want to make sure that I have a contractor that's going to be on site on August 18th or whatever. Whenever we know, especially if you're doing construction draws, whenever we know that the bank has gotten over there and they can approve the title, they can approve you starting construction. right? If you got no construction loan and you're just doing it out of pocket, you could probably start that very same day. But we want to make sure that everything is scheduled. Now, here's what I would suggest. During due diligence and the time before closing, spend a ton of time getting that all set up and scheduled. If you haven't finished it, continue to work through the scheduling and making sure deliveries are set up and all that kind of stuff prior to starting on the renovations, because I feel that every time we start prior to us being ready, it takes a long time to recover from that. We actually go slower. The project goes worse than anticipated because now we're trying to play catch up. So don't get people in too soon. Try to get it all set up prior to closing. But if you don't, again, don't rush it. Don't get people in too soon. So that's prior to closing. Now, when closing happens and we have our schedule set up and everything ready to go, we want to make sure that we communicate extremely well with everybody involved. And prior to closing it, quite frankly, leading up to that, it's really important to make sure you're communicating well with everybody involved. Communication is where I think most projects really break down. So when I'm looking at communication, I want to make sure I've got open communication with everybody involved. I've got consistent communication with everyone involved. That means we are sending out emails, we are doing phone calls, we are really establishing a clear line of communication between everybody involved. So it depends on how you're managing this project, but if you are managing it yourself or you have a team member managing yourself, that looks a little bit different than if you hired somebody third party to manage it for you. Maybe it's a single contractor, maybe it's a third party project manager, or maybe it's your property management company. That all looks a little bit different, but it all looks very similar. We want to have a chain of communication. And I want to make sure that everyone that is important in that chain of communication is actually involved in the chain of communication. So what I see that happens is that I've got maybe a project manager, and that project manager maybe communicates with me, and then they communicate with the other people that are on the job, but we don't all communicate together. I want to all communicate together. So that way, if a decision it needs to be made, we know what happens. What ends up going wrong with a project, and this has happened to me many, many times, including actually on this project that I'm talking about right now, is I've got a project manager that's communicating with the contractors or the designer or somebody else, and that's not communicating with me equally. And all of a sudden something gets lost in translation, and we have something that happens in that project that needs to either be redone or causes some friction. And that's what we want to try to avoid. So really getting everyone involved in consistent communication. Perfect example, close on this property. The designer and project manager, they design the logo and have that all ready to go. And they already have it designed and they already have it approved and they're starting to order stuff on it. And meanwhile, my team is designing the logo. And we didn't have this clear communication between all the parties. And so we had one logo designed and things ordered and things purchased and starting to go up. And we said, whoa, time out. That's not what we're going with. We want this design instead. And so it ended up working out just fine, but we wasted some time. We wasted some energy on that because we didn't communicate clearly with each other. So open, consistent, and clear communication is really, really important. And by doing that, we're going to save ourselves a ton of time. Just get on a cadence, get on a regular meeting, right? And we're talking when we communicate, when we're talking about timelines, we're talking about our budget, we're talking about our really just the overall design and the important things that are happening with that project. So I want to know how many units are getting renovated, when those units are going to be completed, how much they're going to be completed for. We want to know any problems that are going on with the units. So what are you discovering within those units? And we got to be communicating on a weekly basis or a daily basis or whatever it might be to so where we can stay aligned with each other. We want to know when the next step is happening. Um, your property manager is super important in this process because they need to know how many units you want to tackle each month. And you need to understand how many units you're going to have available to tackle each month. So if the property manager doesn't have this expectation that they're going to have 10 units ready to be renovated on, August 1st, but you plan on having 10 units available August 1st, that doesn't work, right? Because all of a sudden the contractor is expecting to have 10 units delivered to them August 1st, and they get three. And they got people lined up and they're pissed and you're mad, and it just doesn't work very well. Or maybe they planned on five and you give them 10. Again, that just doesn't work because they've planned their schedule out and you plan your schedule out. And if you're not communicating with each other, you're not really providing clear updates and expectations and what's going on. It's just going to work really poorly. Um, we really have to make sure we've got a good monitor and control system in place. So, how are we tracking progress? Again, this is communication, but are we how are we tracking progress? What kind of charts are we using? Is everybody using the same charts? Are we going based on our rent roll? Do we have a dashboard, a construction dashboard? How a nat chart? Like how are we actually processing and controlling the project, um, the project cadence, right? And what's happening and what's coming up next. Again, it's about communication, but it's about really monitoring and be able to control that system and what's coming and making sure everybody's on the same page. You want to give access for everybody. Maybe it's the rent roll or the dashboard or whatever you have set up. There's a lot of project management software systems if you want to invest in one of those, but I want to make sure we have that. And then cost management within that is really, really important. Again, implementing a system that really tracks and helps control the project costs instead of saying, oh, the unit's costing us about $20,000. I want to know exactly how much that unit cost us because I know from experience that one unit might cost us $20,000, but the next unit might cost us $26,000 because we had to do extra things. And so all of a sudden we've got 8 units that cost us an extra $6,000 per unit. We might be completely blowing through our budget and we don't even know it because we're not tracking it clearly. So track it very clearly. If you are budgeting based on a per unit basis, I need to know how much each unit is costing me, how much it's costing. So that's super important to make sure we have a cost management system. Quality control is really big. So how are you making sure you're getting the product you set out to get? One thing that we do is monitor and walk units on a consistent basis, on a weekly basis. But the other thing that we do is when a unit is set to be delivered, we do final walkthroughs and we come up with, we have tape and we're sticking it on the walls and we're making notes on the tape to make sure that everybody knows what needs to be done and and having a list. So they have a clear list and understanding of everything that needs to get done, everything that needs to get fixed. And we walk through with the contractors, especially if we're having a quality control issue, and we set expectations. I'm not going to spend $25,000 per unit and get a poor quality project. We want it done right. We want it done well, and got to pay attention to that, right? Once they fix those things, again, another walkthrough. The goal is that we walk through one time. We only have a few little things to check off, and then they fix it. And the next time we walk through, there's nothing. If you're consistently having to go back and go back and go back, we've got a problem. That might be that the project manager and the contractor aren't communicating properly, or it might be that the contractor is the wrong contractor for the job and needs to be fired. Fire people quickly, hire them slowly. You want to have the right people on the job. If they're not able to do the quality that you ask for, if they're not able to get it done in time, that's a big problem. There's another thing that we need to be really aware of. So when we do a project, we're not hiring a single contractor for the project typically. So unless it's something smaller. But usually we have a flooring company. Um, we have kind of a general contractor that's going to do most of the work, but we have a flooring company, we have a painting company. Um, we might even have a different countertop company, especially if we're doing granite. Um, we have a different electrician typically, plumber, HVAC, that type of stuff. It's not controlled by the general contractor. They're controlled by our project manager. So we have to make sure all those people are lining up. But the critical thing is when you hire a contractor or contractors, you have to set up those clear expectations with them. They have to know exactly what you're looking for. You have to communicate with them and continue to train them to understand exactly what kind of quality you're looking for in that job and that they're meeting your timeline. So it's timeline, budget, quality. And if they can't hit those three major things after many times of you showing them, and I shouldn't say many, like many, I'm talking many as like if I walk through a unit with you and I'm having all kinds of problems, maybe it went over budget and maybe it went longer than expected, and you can't correct it the next time, I'm probably going to fire you. If you've corrected most of it, maybe I'll give you another chance. But if you can't correct it the next time, then you just got to move on. And it's always better to fire somebody and get rid of them than to wait and to think they're going to get to your expectations eventually, or to wait because you're like, I can't find somebody, so I'm just going to keep them on until I find somebody new. I'd rather have the project come to a screeching halt for a couple weeks till you find the right person than to keep the wrong person on the job for far too long. That's in my opinion, that's a big mistake. Um, Really important to make goals, uh, specifically timeline goals. I think that's really, really important because we are renovating. So, for instance, this project that we're renovating 99 units, we bought it in March. Our goal is to have it done by January. We want 99 units renovated by January. We've got a full exterior that we're renovating. Right now we're painting the brick. We're replacing a mansard roof. We're ripping that off, replacing a mansard roof, redoing the balconies, adding a crown molding to the balconies. We're doing the landscaping. We're redoing it's on the river, so we're redoing the whole riverfront of the property, the kind of the parking and green space. Um, so, signage, all that kind of stuff. We're doing a lot of amenity spaces, adding a pickleball court, podcast studio, co-work space, fitness center, community room, all kinds of stuff. So we're doing all this, and our goal is to make sure we get it done from March through January. So we have to be completely on top of things. And here's the problem: if we don't get it done by January, we're going to continue to have this go on. And now, if we're only a few weeks late, or maybe even a month late, it's not a huge loss. But the longer it goes, the bigger loss it is. And so right now, I'm looking at this project and I'm going, okay, we're doing really well. We've got a lot of units completed. We're really starting to hammer out the exterior. But one of the big things we're missing right now is the interior hallways. So my big push right now is we have to get these interior hallways done because we are wasting time and it's valuable time. We are peak leasing season. We've got, 40 units completed or nearly 40 units completed already, which is great. We bought it in March, and I'm sitting here talking to you in mid-July. That's great, but we don't have the hallways done. So every prospective tenant comes into the door and they see this ugly, horrible hallway. They also see this ugly, nasty exterior. Those are two big items that their eyes are being drawn to. Most people don't have the creative ability to go, place is going to be amazing. Most people don't see that. So what we have to make sure we're doing is spending our time and effort on fixing those big problems. If I take an extra month to do that, all of a sudden we find ourselves out of peak leasing season. Now we're going to be potentially having to drop rents in order to lease through the winter. That's a big problem. I don't want to drop rents. And so if I can't manage a project properly to get things done on time, I have to maybe drop rents. I have slower leasing velocity. And all of a sudden, I'm losing out on tens of thousands of dollars every single month. Here, perfect example. We have a project we did. This is a huge project that we did. And it took us far too long. We had all kinds of material delays, we had labor shortages, all kinds of issues. And this project that was supposed to last 12 months ended up lasting 24 months. We lost out on thousands of dollars. The market also shifted during that time. And so we lost out on a significant portion of dollars because the project went um, over our time budget. Why was that? We can make excuses, certainly. We can talk about COVID, we can talk about labor shortages, we can talk about material delays, all kinds of stuff. So we can make those as excuses. Ultimately, what it comes down to is poor planning, poor execution, poor communication. Those are the things that really are it's the only thing that we can control. And again, we can make excuses about some of the things that happened. And certainly there's some validity to those excuses. However, that doesn't solve the problem. So we have to be able to execute in order to have this project done on time. I look at when I was flipping houses, flipping is all about velocity, velocity of money. I have to get that project done. So if I close on the property and I can get that project done in 30 days, we can then sell that property. We can take, quite frankly, a lot less profit because we can sell that property, we can move that money to the next deal and continue on. If I can get these projects done in 30 days, I close, 30 days I'm done, I get it sold, maybe that's another 45 days to close. Maybe add a couple days here and there. Maybe I'm completely in and out of this project in 90 days. Now I can cycle that money and get in the next project. I can do that every 90 days versus I delay on my project. It takes too long. All of a sudden it's 3 months, 4 months, maybe. And so instead of 90 days, I'm taking nearly 6 months by the time I actually close on this project, 5, 6 months. I could have done two projects. So you follow me, like I can do two projects and make 20K on each of those projects. Now I'm 40K. Where if this other project and it took longer and all that kind of stuff, and I make, 30K on it, I got better profit on that one property, but I was able to do two at lower profit and I win, right? And of course, if you only make 20, now you're only making half, right? So, and markets shift. You underwrite to the current market you're in. So the longer you take on a project, you have the potential of the market shifting. I mean, I watched it firsthand in 2008 through 2013. Of one of the houses my wife and I bought, we saw this perfect example. I mean, this guy renovated this house. He took forever to renovate it. He finally listed the property, listed it for too much, and he watched his value erode through 2008 through 2000. I think we bought it in 2011, and he watched his value just completely erode. And he had it listed at one point in time for right around 350,000. Might even be more. And we ended up buying it for I'll probably off on the price a little bit, but I think it was like $98,000. Um, because of the lack of velocity, right? Took too long in the project, took to let the market dictate the price, and he lost out. Same thing happens with apartment buildings. If you sit, you're losing velocity, you're losing a lot of money. So, man, I've got a lot of lessons I've learned and a lot of mistakes that I've made. So hopefully you can learn from some of the lessons I've learned. Hopefully you can learn from some of the mistakes I've learned. I think the biggest mistakes that I have made, well, a couple of them, I'll add one that I haven't really talked about, is making sure every contractor you put a contract with, you have a contract in writing. I don't want to get a contractor started without having something in writing. because all of a sudden you'll find that things change and your communication is very difficult if you have different expectations. So get it in writing, get it very, very detailed. The next thing is you get 3, 4, even 5, 6 bids. I'd prefer to get like 5 or 6 bids on every aspect and everything that I'm um, trying to have subbed out, right? I want multiple bids before I start projects. That's wildly important. Um, and again, in writing with contracts, with details. And it's okay, by the way, to take one bid. And if you get two, let's say if we get 5 bids and you go, hey, I really like this contractor. They got great pricing. They seem like they really know what they're doing. They promise a great timeline. Blah 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 blah. It's okay, in my opinion, to take um, bids and to compare them and to add in the details from one bid to the other to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. So if one bid is fairly loose and doesn't have a lot of the details, make sure you add that all the details and every little last thing, even to as there's going to be 6 different paint colors. There's going to be, you're going to clean the property afterwards to where there's no dust on a wet rag type of thing, whatever it is. Make sure those details are involved in that bid and then in the contract, and you always want to reference the contract and the bid together so they tie to each other, and so that way you can point to it and say, no, look, this is not what we agreed upon. Here's what we agreed upon. How are they getting paid? I don't like paying people up front. I'm okay with paying materials up front as long as they're dropped on the property. I want to control that. So how are they getting paid? When are they getting paid? When do we decide if we have a holdback? How much of a holdback do we have? Those are really important and valuable things to have in contracts. Um, Timelines are huge, and I like incentivizing. I like actually paying more or paying less due to not hitting timelines. So if a contractor is like, "Yep, I can get this done, and we'll get it done in 30 days," great. That's great. That's a perfect timeline for me. But we're going to put that in a contract. We're going to put that in writing, and there's going to be clear penalties if you don't hit that 30 days. So each, and I want to do a penalty per day, per every, whatever, every week, whatever you want to set it up. But I want consistent penalties. I want those penalties to grow. I want a one-time penalty, because a one-time penalty, then they'll just whatever. Then there's no incentive for them. So I want to make sure we have enough holdback so those penalties make sense, and I want to make sure we have enough of a penalty that they are held accountable for those penalties. So that's really important. The other things I've already mentioned, right? Clear, consistent communication, budget, making sure you're following the budget and staying on top of the budget, and making sure you're really in charge of that and in control of that as well. And then you have very, very good details. I guess we just covered that, but very, very good details, pre-construction, post-construction, during construction, all that kind of stuff. So, all right, hopefully that helps. I know that was long, but a lot on my mind here is we're doing a big project right now and going to start a couple other projects, and just tons of lessons learned along the way and still learning them. I've made plenty of mistakes, throughout the years, and continue to learn, sometimes the hard way, but continue to learn on these projects. So that's all I got. You have a fantastic rest of the day. Make every day a Saturday.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you being a loyal listener. I would love to have you go on to our Facebook page and subscribe, give us a thumbs up, go on to iTunes or wherever you listen and give us a rating and review. Don't forget to subscribe. Your rating and review just helps us push this out to more and more people and continue to grow our audience and hopefully positively affect a ton of people out there that really need this and want this. So the other thing I've got for you is a free ebook on my website. So go on to ventured.com VentureDproperties.com, VentureDproperties.com, and download our free ebook on real estate and on syndication. And I've got some data points in there, some really good stuff for you. So I'd love to have you take a look at that. It's free. I'm not expecting anything from it. And also, look, if you want some help in multifamily, want some help learning, growing, getting your business off the ground, I would love to talk to you about what it would look like to work with me potentially and see if that's a good fit. So you can go to coachwithdex.com and check that out, and we can definitely have a call. Thanks a lot for listening. You make it a fantastic rest of the day. I'll catch you on the next episode.